Hi, I'm Douglas McGregor, the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice. And we're very fortunate today. We have an extraordinarily important guest. This is a courageous individual who's, as far as we know, has done something nobody else has. And you'll recognize him immediately. His name is Anthony Rubin. He and his brother made the trek along the current invasion route that begins south of the border and reaches the Mexican border at any number of different points. We wanted to hear him tell us what he saw, what he thinks. And so, Anthony, start off by telling us, why you did it and then the kinds of dangers you faced on the route.
For sure. Well, thank you for having me on. Why we did it, bottom line was that it simply hadn't been done before up until that point. I figured why not be the first? And it was something that I thought that had to be done, honestly. Nobody has shown that entire route from start to finish, and people have done parts of it, and they've done parts of it very well. Like there's been plenty of documentaries made about the Darien Gap or about La Bestia, the Mexican Train of Death, and other parts as well. But nobody had put the whole thing together and also shown the groups that are quarterbacking this thing. And so that was the whole point of this. As far as the dangers along the way, I mean, the whole route is freaking dangerous. From start to finish, you first start to be aware of dangers when you get to this coastal port town in Colombia. It's called Nicocli. That's like this town that has basically been turned into a human smuggling haven. From there, you could tell as soon as you get there that a large portion of this town's economy has now been centered around helping people get into the jungle. Like there are straight up whole blocks, like multiple blocks in this town that are just dedicated to selling camping gear and whatever kind of gear you would need to get through the jungle, right? As soon as you get off the bus at this town, again, the name is Nicocli. You guys can see it on a map. It's in Colombia. As soon as you get off the bus, you have human smugglers coming up to you asking if you need a guide through the jungle. And my brother and I were there for a while. We were actually there for about a week because we were taking boats to various Darien Gap entry points and learning more about what we were going to get ourselves into before we actually went for it. And there was a point where we went out to this dock that's way off at there's multiple docks, right? But we went to this dock that's way at the end, away from everything else. And we started filming. We took out our camera, we started filming, of course, knowing full well that it's not quite safe to do so. And I mean, there were men that, are clearly smugglers that were giving us some of the nastiest looks you've ever seen, like extremely dangerous looks, and they're sinister looks, I should say. I don't know what dangerous look is, but it wasn't good. And you could tell that you could feel the situation. You could feel the danger that you were in. And we had been warned also by police that are there that, you don't want to be brandishing a camera around certain parts of this town because, again, there's criminal activities going on. So, from that point on, we kind of just laid low in that town and waited to get our boat ride out of there to this coastal town of Querétaro, which is in Panama, where we started our trek. But the dangers are all the way down there. And then, of course, to the very end, where we're picked up by the cartel. It's all through.
Well, the police then are clearly not going to intervene to do very much. They're trying to keep some measure of order, no doubt, but they're certainly not going to commit themselves to round up the smugglers and others who may be involved, as you say, in criminal activity, right?
Oh, I highly doubt it. As a matter of fact, there's plenty of stories. Again, we're Americans, right? We're the gringos down there, and that probably helps us to a degree with the police. But there were multiple stories that we heard from illegal aliens that were on the way up here of Colombian police that just straight up robbed them along the way. So I mean, these people are corrupt as can be, for sure.
Yeah, well, the local police in many countries of the world are very much like that. They supplement their income the hard way, which is not easy for the population. You talked about the deplorable places that you had to stay. You talked about an area that looked like a landfill. Would you elaborate a little on that?
100%. So the camp, which it actually has a name, and now the name escapes me now. They actually gave this camp a name, but maybe it'll come to me during the interview. But the first camp you stay at. So we enter the jungle, trek for a whole day, and then you get to this camp. And this camp, if you can imagine, it's just basically a clearing in the middle of the jungle. And it is a straight up landfill. And if you can imagine, I mean, there's been people taking this route, caravans taking this route through the jungle for years now. And so what happens, a caravan comes through, they stay at this camp, they leave their trash everywhere, they piss everywhere, they shit everywhere. And then they keep going through. And then another group comes in, less than a week later. It just keeps on happening. So you're left with a landfill, essentially. And that's where we slept the first night. And I mean, the most disgusting place you can imagine. I just wanted to set up our tent. And like, it's like it's so disgusting. You don't even want to move. You just don't want to get anything on you. You're just like laying there. It's like, don't move an inch. And that's where we started to really, again, there was dangers in there. I don't want to say we started to feel danger. I mean, we felt dangerous again, way before that. But there were men walking around that were armed. There was one man in particular that was walking around with a rifle that was coming up to us, asking us questions. That ended up happening the morning after. That was basically like interrogating us. What are we doing? And don't take out our camera at all. That type of thing. People coming up to us saying, "Oh, are you an American?" And, we would say, "Yeah, we are. We're Americans." And then they would just give us a nasty look and turn their back on us. So those types of things were happening. Yeah, honestly, it was like the type of situation, again, with the people that are saying that to us and turning back. It's like, I don't even know who the heck that is or why they would react that way to us, but that's what you're dealing with. And, it could be very dangerous. You just don't know.
You also mentioned that a number of people were helping to quote unquote quarterback this operation. Do you want to explain that? And by the way, why don't we roll that clip now that shows what Anthony was talking about?
UN-affiliated organizations seen earlier along the route also have a presence inside these Panamanian camps. A few on the scene include OIM, Red Cross, UNICEF, HIAS, European Union, Doctors Without Borders, UNHCR, and the Norwegian Refugee Council.
Wow. Now, what do they specifically do?
They do different things. Of course, a Red Cross, that's a lot of medical aid. You have HIAS. You see HIAS there. I've seen loads of maps distributed by that organization. We ran into them first when we were in Ecuador, and then you see them all the way. I mean, when you get to, again, that town of Nicoclí, that port town where everybody gathers before they enter the gap, they are straight up handing out maps that show the different boat routes that you need to take to various entrances of the Darien Gap, wherever you might be going. That's an agency or an organization that has received millions of dollars in federal taxpayer funding. What are some of the other ones that were on that list as well? Of course, the UN is kind of like the umbrella organization over all this. They hand out loads of maps. They also hand out, they work with the World Food Organization, I believe is what it's called. They hand out food packages. We saw that in Ecuador, like these baggies that are handed out that are just full of food. And so basically, you get to these camps, all the organizations I mentioned there are in those camps. And it's basically like a staging point. They get the food packages, they get the maps, they get whatever, healthcare they need. And then they get a one-way ticket across Panama and into Costa Rica. And then within a few weeks, they're knocking at the door of the United States.
Yeah, the funding source is important because a lot of the money does come ultimately from the American taxpayer.
100%.
I don't think most Americans understand that. Now, you also saw the UN was down there, and I'm sure some of the money they're using is also money we contribute on an annual basis to the United Nations. Did you get the feeling from any of the people that you saw that maybe they had any reservations about what they were doing to facilitate the success of this northern invasion?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, you talk to some of these people. One of my previous videos that people can go find, it was the first trip that I took down to the Darien Gap to visit these camps with Michael Yan about a year ago. There's a clip in there that I include with a woman who's working for HIAS, and she has this hand-drawn map of Panama, and around her are about 10 or so illegal aliens. And she's explaining, here's how you're going to get through Panama. And so afterwards, this part I didn't include in the video, but afterwards, we were speaking to her and we asked, how many people do you think have gone to the United States over the last few years? And she guessed that maybe it was just tens of thousands, right? Like maybe 100,000 or something like that, or 200,000. Then we told her it was actually, over 6 million. And she couldn't believe it. These people, they think they're on a humanitarian mission, at least the people that are the foot soldiers of this. I don't think that they realize that they are actually pawns for a much larger geopolitical agenda. At least that's not the impression that I get. No, they think that they're doing something that's humanitarian and they're helping desperate masses of people get to the United States, as far as I can tell.
As you move along this route, particularly as you get into Mexico, were you witness to any extreme cases of criminality, brutality meted out to any of the people moving north? We hear all these stories about terrible things happening to women and children and so forth. Did you see any evidence for that sort of thing?
I'm trying to think on this particular trip. On the trip that I did about a year ago, you hear people coming across that they exit the jungle and then they tell you that they got raped. Of course, we talked to people when we got to these camps on the Panamanian side the group of people that they were with got robbed in the jungle. I mean, none of this is news. It happens every day. But that there's armed men in there that basically tell everybody to drop all their belongings and keep going, that type of thing. And then, of course, when we got into Mexico, we dealt with at least 3 cartel organizations throughout the entire Mexican part of the journey. So, I mean, there's criminal elements just throughout the entire thing.
Now, these cartel organizations, is it because they control some of the territory that you pass through, or were they just deliberately setting up checkpoints for their own purposes along the route?
No, I mean, for example, all of the entry points. So the first cartel organization we ran into, to the best of my knowledge, was the Sinaloa cartel. That's just based off of looking at territorial maps, cartel territory maps of Mexico. The area that we crossed from Guatemala into Mexico, that area right there, basically we had to pay $125 a head to get into Mexico. And we were taken across. People have probably seen videos of this. It's like these inflatable tire raft boats that they have that take you across all day long. These little rafts are operating, right? $125. And I thought we were just going to get on this raft and go across, and then that was going to be it. But no, you get on this raft, you go across, and then they usher you into a freaking stash house. And then from there, they have trucks and cars pick you up, and they pack you in. It's basically like a clown car. It's like they just stuff as many people into the cars as they can and force the doors shut, and they drive you through these back roads of Mexico, until you're eventually dropped off. But right there, I was worried. During that, I was incredibly worried that that the car was simply going to stop and we were going to be ordered out, kidnapped, or ordered out and robbed, or you just have no idea. But no, that's the first organization. And there was another one where we boarded the train of death. And then the final one was the Gulf cartel that we ran into.
Well, that's pretty nerve-wracking. Did you see any evidence that the Mexican authorities are trying to secure anything along the border with Guatemala?
Not along the border with Guatemala, but what is interesting, you would imagine that they would try to secure that, right? Stop it at its source. But what is interesting is all along, because we had to take a bus up to from southern Mexico up to Mexico City. It was like a 24-hour bus ride. And all along there, I would say every few hours, maybe every 3 hours or so, there would be a checkpoint where, Mexican authorities would actually get on the bus and check everybody's passport. And they were serious about it. Like, for example, my brother and I, our passports were, underneath in the storage area of the bus. And they straight up like pulled us off the bus and were interrogating us. We're like, no, like, trust us, we're Americans. But they didn't believe us. And so they let us get our passports. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. There was a part of that story because our passports hadn't been stamped, which is why they didn't believe us, because we got smuggled into Mexico, right? And so they were, I don't know what they were planning on doing, but eventually they just let us go through because they could tell we were American. But, my point is these checkpoints are everywhere along these major roads. And if you're an illegal alien in that country, to the best of my knowledge, they'll pull you off and they will send you back across the border and drop you back off in Guatemala. And so that was quite interesting, right? Because you could get into the country incredibly easily, but then actually getting up to northern Mexico to the U.S. along these highways would be very, very difficult to do.
So the definition of an illegal in Mexico is someone without a passport or someone who has a passport that hasn't been stamped?
That's a good question. Well, honestly, probably a passport that hasn't been stamped, because most of these people do have passports from their country of origin, right? Just like, my brother and I had, but they saw it wasn't stamped when they pulled us off the bus. They're like, what the heck's going on here? And we just made something up. We're like, oh, we don't know. We just came to the country. Nobody stamped it. And that was that. But, we were Americans. I guess that was the only reason why we were let through. But yeah, no, I'm sure, if you're somebody from Somalia and you got a Somali passport that's not stamped, to the best of my knowledge, they're going to haul your ass back down to southern Mexico. You're going to have to start again.
Well, given what you're describing and the millions of people that have taken this route, if this whole process were shut down, In other words, the Mexican border were secured by U.S. forces. Nobody gets in. It's not legally admissible under law. What kind of impact would that have financially on the various criminal organizations and elements up and down the route that are currently profiting? Would that not provoke them if they
Oh,
lost all that revenue?
I think it definitely would to a certain extent. I mean, that would definitely be a blow. But you got, for example, the Chinese that are flying in, right? They'll just take planes. If they have the appropriate visa, they will just take a plane into Mexico and then go from there. There's other groups that are doing that as well if they have the money for it. So, you'd still definitely, unless they shut that down as well, or somehow we're able to mitigate the flow of people that are flying in and then trying to cross. But certainly, yeah, I mean, most of the people you see coming into the U.S. first cross that southern border with Mexico. And if that was secured, I think that would definitely be a blow.
Well, I don't think we can secure the southern border of Mexico. I'm talking about California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. If we sealed those borders, prevented anybody from entering, that would shut it all down. And my impression, based upon what you're telling me, is this could cost the criminal organization supporting it potentially billions of dollars.
100%. I mean, it's been estimated that, well, the estimates vary, but some of them are, multiple billions worth of dollars annualized that these people are making, that these cartel organizations are making. I mean, you could tell very quickly. So it costs us $125 per head to get into Mexico. But then there are stories of, for example, there's a Chinese man that I met during my first Darien Gap trip who I've stayed in touch with. And he told me that the cartel charged him, I believe it was $5,000 per head to actually get into the United States. And that price definitely varies depending on the group that they're helping get into the country. But I mean, they are absolutely making a killing right now. Imagine that. $5,000 per head for this Chinese family. Was it $20,000 for a family of four? And I think over the last, 2023, there were 20,000 Chinese that have come into the U.S. illegally through that southern border. And that's just the Chinese, of course. We're not talking about any other group, the other 6 million plus people, right? So you can only imagine how much money they're making.
Now, do you think the child trafficking and drug trafficking is also part of this mass movement up into the United States, or do they use other routes once they reach the Mexican border?
Do I think, what do you mean by that exactly?
Child trafficking and drug trafficking. In other words, that criminality that involves moving children into the United States, or drugs, illegal drugs into the United States, is that separated out from the exodus, or not the exodus, but the mass invasion? Do they go to separate places, different routes, or are they all mixed in?
To the best of my knowledge, they're all mixed in. Now, I'm sure there are other routes. I could say two things in regards to this. The first thing is when I was in Guatemala, myself, Michael Yan, and others had this sort of off-record meeting with Guatemalan government officials. And they told us that what'll happen is, if there's an illegal alien that can't pay their dues, what the cartel will do is they'll say, okay, well, basically you're going to be a drug runner for us, and we're going to strap these drugs to you, and you're going to take them across the border for us. So that's the first thing. That was told to us by Guatemalan authorities. Mm-hmm. So that's the source for that. The second thing is I've personally seen, I've traveled the length of the border. I've been from Boca Chica, Texas, and the Gulf of Mexico, all the way to San Diego and many places in between. And I have seen personally grown men multiple times. It's not just like a one-off. I've seen this multiple times on multiple different trips. Grown men coming across the border with limp, incapacitated children. So, you tell me what that's all about. As far as I'm concerned, that's all I need to see to make the determination that that child must be being trafficked.
Right. No, there's no question about it.
Yeah.
Now, once you reached the border, did you see how people were treated by the border authorities or whoever is assigned on the border right now? Do you have any comments about the way these people were treated? I'm told they're being given handheld phones, cell phones. They eventually get tickets to fly on aircraft to various places, or bus tickets. And supposedly they receive some amount of money. I've heard different reports, $5,000, $2,500, $2,400. And then that's a payment plus the tickets and transportation to get them somewhere else. Are they being told where to go, or do they show up and say, oh, I want to go to Milwaukee?
Right. So here's what I could say in that regard. So the first part of that question, where you ask how they're treated, They basically get their hands held the entire time, and Border Patrol calls them give ups. And I've heard Border Patrol tell me that they respect the people that run a lot more, because at least those people are trying to, work for their entry into the United States, as opposed to these people. They know that all they have to do is give up in front of Border Patrol. And, for example, let's take this back. Let's also add the child trafficking aspect into this. I've seen Border Patrol detain these men that are part of a larger group that just crossed into the United States that are carrying these limp, incapacitated kids, right? And Border Patrol, to the best of my knowledge, does absolutely nothing. I mean, they should immediately be separating that child from this man, questioning the man, what the heck is going on here? But I don't see any of that, right? And I've witnessed this multiple times. That's the first thing. Now, as far as where these people are going and where they're choosing to go, what I can say is this. I don't know the specifics about, how or if you have groups that are saying, okay, here's a group that we're sending up to Chicago. Here's a group that we're going to send to New York. And, the people that are actually being sent up don't have much of a say in it. I'm not sure how that works, but I do know that you have, for example, Catholic charities that are buying these people bus tickets. If they say, I want to go to New York, okay, well, we're going to get you a bus ticket. Here you go. So I do know that. And I also know that once they get to a place like New York, sanctuary city, where they're guaranteed shelter for 30 days, what happens is they are then actually guaranteed like a relocation package. Well, and what'll happen is if they tell the city of New York, hey, listen, I don't like it anymore, I want to go to Chicago, New York will then actually pay for their bus ticket and pay to move all of their belongings to a different shelter in Chicago, and they could just keep on getting moved around like that. So I do know that that's going on for sure.
Well, with that in mind, let's roll the second clip.
You said your name is Jay?
Yeah, first name Jay.
Cool, man. And you're an American. You said you've been on the streets for how long?
Going on 10 years, 2015.
Damn. Okay, and we're right outside. I mean, that's the Row Hotel right there. That's where they're all living. But you don't get any assistance. Like, what kind of assistance do you get?
I just started getting EBT food stamps.
Uh-huh.
It's like payments. They give you like $200 for the month. It's once a month sort of thing.
Yeah.
But that and Medicaid, and that was hard to get.
That and Medicaid. Damn. Okay, so these people are living in nice warm rooms. They're getting food every night. Like, when was the last time you slept in a room? Do you sleep in a room?
Dude, it's been a while, honestly. A few months ago, someone got me a hotel for the night.
Yeah. It's since then nothing.
And of course, the man you're talking to is ostensibly an American citizen.
Correct. So, yeah, just to comment on that, it's quite sad to say. Here's the deal. I am a hardcore free market capitalist. Okay. I do not like the welfare state, which has been responsible for the demise of different groups in the United States. I mean, I don't really want to get into it right now, but that's a different conversation. But the welfare state is a horrible thing. It's basically at the highest level, the best way to put it would be politicians buying votes with taxpayer money is what it comes down to. And so I'm against it. However, if we're going to have any socialism, let it be for, poor Americans that are rummaging through dumpsters on the streets instead of military-age men from Russia and China, countries in Africa and wherever else. It's the most atrocious thing that you could see when you see, for example, that man who I literally met outside of the Row Hotel when he was dumpster diving looking for food. That's how I met him. And we started talking and we did the interview. And right there, the hotel is housing all of those military-age men that are getting free accommodation and free food. And it's quite sickening, really.
Well, there's a plan on the Hill, especially in the Senate, to try and enlist large numbers of these illegals coming into the United States, into the armed forces, specifically the Army, Marines, with the goal of giving them citizenship and making them voters. I mean, the people that you saw, are these people that you would want heavily armed in the United States Armed Forces? Are these people likely to defend the United States in any emergency or conflict? I mean, what are we dealing with?
I highly doubt it. We don't know who the heck these people are is the bottom line. How could they possibly be thoroughly vetting all these people that are coming into the country when it's, hundreds of thousands of them on a month-over-month basis? It's impossible. And then they're just being let loose. Now we're going to let these people into our military. And I saw the bill that you're talking about. I forget the name of it. But let's see where that ends up going. And then you have Dick Durbin also on board with such an idea. I mean, these are treasonous ideas as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not even quite sure that I believe that these politicians, if we want to, call them that, these sick people, don't understand what that could turn into. I'm not sure that I believe that. I think that they know damn well the dangers of such a policy. I just simply don't think that they care, and they're doing this for a larger political agenda, whatever that may be.
Well, perhaps the most important thing you've done is demonstrate conclusively that today in the United States, every state is a border state. The notion this is Texas' problem or New Mexico's problem or Arizona's problem is nonsense. These people are now pouring into the country and ending up all over the place. They're costing us a great deal of money. And as you say, we know nothing about them. And when they are arrested, as recently we had a shooting in New York City and a policeman was shot at, and the people perpetrating it were illegal migrants. They were subsequently released. This sort of nonsense is so destructive, it's hard to imagine how anyone in the United States government can support it. But you've done a huge service for the American people to show us very, very clearly, unambiguously, what we confront.
Well, honestly, I'm not quite sure that there's any choice but to do that if you have the means to do it at this point. Or, if you have another way of fighting back, go for it. But just to sit idly by at this point, if you care about the country, or if you say you care about the country and you're sitting idly by, rather, I would venture to say that you must not care very much, because, we are quite literally on borrowed time, I believe. I mean, I believe this country is on the verge of extinction. And by that, I mean, the individual liberties that we are supposed to cherish in this country are going to go by the wayside. And that's why I believe we have an administration that is importing tens of millions of foreigners from all around the world, because they simply have no concept of these ideals, right? They don't know about, or, they're not brought up thinking about free market capitalism, about individual liberties, about the people being the master and the government being the servant, right? These are people that come from socialist states. And I've interviewed plenty of these people, and they're praising Joe Biden, and they're talking about all the assistance that they're going to get. And they think it's just a given, right? And they're talking about how all these people, for example, in the New York video, they're all sitting in these camps waiting to get Medicaid. Okay. So these are people that are going to be minions of the state. And I personally believe that's why they're being brought in, basically to wash out freedom-loving Americans, and eventually will be an extinct class of human beings. And that'll be it. There'll be nowhere else to run to.
Well, we at Our Country, Our Choice are determined to prevent that outcome. And you've struck an enormous blow for the interests of American people in general, for the nation as a whole, for the republic and its survival. So we thank you. We wish you all the best. And we want to make your work as available as possible to as many people who can see it. And we'll certainly see to it that this video is posted where all of our members can see it. And I think that they will walk away with the same conclusion that I feel right now. You've described a catastrophe for the country. We need to stop it. And the only way it will stop is if we Americans insist on it. And right now, that's not happening. So thank you, Anthony, for everything you've done and for your brother. And God bless you. And we look forward to more things from you in the future.
Well, thank you for speaking with me. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my privilege. Bye-bye.